Welcome back to the Noble Pursuit podcast. Today's guest is Ryan Bomberger, the co-founder of the Radiance Foundation. He's also an Emmy Award-winning creative professional, an author, and one of the most compelling voices in the pro-life movement today. Throughout our conversation, we talk about identity, fatherhood, adoption, truth, and why every life has inherent worth. I think you're going to be challenged, encouraged, and inspired by this conversation. Here's my interview with Ryan Bomberger. All right, Ryan, thank you so much for joining the Noble Pursuit podcast today. If you could just give the audience a brief introduction of yourself and kind of tell us about your background and who you are and what you do.
Sure thing. It's great to be here with you today. And I love the work that I do. I love the work that God's called my wife and I to do through our organization, the Radiance Foundation. I'm the co-founder and chief creative officer of the Radiance Foundation, which is a nonprofit that strives to illuminate that every human life has God-given purpose, whether you're planned, unplanned, able, disabled. Every human life has God-given purpose. And I know this deeply personally as someone who was adopted into a family of 15. I have 12 siblings, 6 brothers and 6 sisters. And out of the 13 kids in our family, 10 of us were adopted. And I was the first of 10 adopted. My particular story and why I'm so passionate about not just fatherhood, but about family and about coming alongside of those that the world so easily writes off as unwanted. I was conceived in rape, but I was adopted in love. And so that's why I fight for the most marginalized amongst the marginalized, because that was once me. I'm married to my best friend, Bethany Bomberger, the other co-founder of the Radiance Foundation. We have 4 kiddos, 2 of whom were also adopted. And as an international speaker, an author, a columnist, a creative professional, and I call myself a factivist. I'm so motivated, so passionate about illuminating God-given purpose, God-given design, God-given identity.
That's awesome. What was it like growing up in a family that size?
Well, when you don't know the other side of things, I guess, it just seemed normal. It's totally normal to have 15 people around the table and eating as fast as you can so you can have seconds. It's totally normal to grow up on a farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and have horses and goats and pigs and a cow that you have to drink the milk from. I mean, not like directly from. For those of you who don't understand milk does come from cows, and it's pasteurized, and the raw milk is very different, and I hated it. Was it chaotic? Wasn't chaotic, but not only did we have the 13 kids on our farm, we usually had 15 to 20 neighborhood kids there. So, a 13-acre farm, lots of fun. I can't imagine growing up any other way. And our family owned a store, still owns a store. It's in Pennsylvania called Bomberger. So that was a whole different dynamic too. So we kind of had 2 homes, our home and then the home away from home at the store. I don't know. I loved it. I loved growing up with siblings who were white, Black, Native American, Vietnamese, able, disabled, just a beautiful mix. And didn't always get along. I would say that I was probably the biggest instigator in that whole mix, but we all survived. My parents survived 13 teenagers, so here I am to tell the story.
How did your adoptive parents shape you into the man that you are today?
My parents, Henry and Andrea Bomberger, loved Jesus. And when you love Jesus, the natural outflow of that is loving people. And they shaped us by living out their worldview. It's interesting because I hear people with the mantra all the time, pro-lifers don't care about kids after they're born. Okay, so adopting 10 kids is not caring about kids after they're born. It's such a ridiculous bumper sticker mantra, but my parents lived it out. They didn't just speak, and they weren't activists in any way, which there's nothing wrong with that, but they just lived out their convictions. My dad chose to be a father to the fatherless, to kids whose many of our birth fathers had abandoned us. In my situation, obviously conceived and raped, that wasn't even a situation where he would be in the picture, but we were just loved unconditionally. And many of us came from really broken backgrounds. So being loved by 2 parents who knew the Lord, loved the Lord, and never gave up on us. Thank God they didn't give up on me. But they dealt with a lot of hard situations and taught us that love really is unconditional and it's always forgiving, and it never gives up. I mean, 1 Corinthians 13, all those attributes of love, I mean, it endures. And my parents didn't just endure, but their love caused our lives to flourish.
There have been seasons where you dealt with bitterness or anger in connection to like the early part of your story, and how has God brought you through that, if so?
Yeah, when when I was young, I had a very, I don't know, I made up a version of the story, my origin story. So it wasn't until till I was 13 that I found out how I came to be. Which, your teenage years are already tumultuous enough. Hey, throw in a total rewrite of your narrative, your origin story. And I wasn't, man, I knew I was loved. I grew up loved. I bitterness, not really bitterness, just confusion and trying to understand, one, how was I conceived in such violence? I wasn't planned. And I struggled with that for a time. But knowing that I was loved like crazy by my parents, that kind of kept me stable in that. I think the bitterness came in when I started giving into a lot of the lies about who I was. And I dealt with a lot of self loathing and self perception issues, which were just lies from the enemy, which led me into depression later on in life, which I was delivered from completely. But I, I knew I was loved. And because of that, that's really what sustained me through a lot of these different times in my teen years, particularly in my 20s, where I struggled a lot. And a lot of that was self-inflicted. It was because instead of believing the word of God, I was believing the world. And thankfully, I'm definitely on the other side of that many years later. But um, I'm grateful that not only did I have parents who loved the Lord and offered a lot of great support and guidance, I had siblings who deeply loved the Lord and were not only great brothers or sisters to me, but great friends who helped me see sometimes what I wasn't allowing myself to see, the truth I wasn't allowing myself to see.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we start believing too much of what the world has to offer, that's when we can slip into that victim mentality, which I feel like our culture is dealing with on absurd levels right now. Um, so for a guy who's listening to this and maybe has slipped into the victim mentality, what would you tell him about, okay, you've noticed that you're in it. How do you get out of it?
Well, victimhood is very potent. I mean, because what it does is it removes the responsibility on you and it projects it onto somebody else. Somebody else is the cause of, but you could live your whole life like that and never be in control of your life. That's why one of the workshops that we run through the Radiance Foundation for teens, especially, is called self-control versus remote control. Because if we're constantly controlled by external circumstances, we can never truly be who God meant us to be. And then we always have a reason. We always have an excuse as to why I can't achieve that. I can't achieve. I mean, oh, it's my color. Give me a break. I mean, if people could flourish during slavery, I mean, you have people like George Washington Carver. You had the first black female millionaire who flourished during slavery. You had Frederick Douglass, one of my childhood heroes, who flourished even though he was a former slave in circumstances that he wasn't in control of. But what he chose in his life was for God to be in control of his life. And that changed everything. We can have horrible circumstances, and I know they vary from person to person. Trust me, I've worked in so many different ministries. I know this, but we can always have the excuse, well, I can't do this because of somebody else, or I can't do this because of something else. That's never going to get you anywhere. We aren't victims. In fact, the word of God says, and I think it's Romans 8:37 says, we're overcomers. We're overcomers. We're not undercomers. We're overcomers. So we are victors. And that's what I have to say to people, because you can get caught up in that downward spiral, which leads nowhere but to just self-destruction. Or we can choose to embrace the truth and to understand that Philippians 4:13, I can do not some things, but I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
So I wanted to ask you about abortion now, because that's obviously one of the things that you are passionate about. And obviously that's something that is hugely debated right now in our country, just in general. Like everybody has an opinion, obviously. So I wanted to ask you, when you're in these debates and you're talking to someone, how have you learned about trying to persuade someone rather than just argue with them?
Yeah, when Facebook first started, I will admit I spent so many hours debating. I thought, if I just one more argument, I got this. And I realized pretty quickly, especially through the wisdom of my wife, that sometimes the debating is not where we need to be. Sometimes we need to ask questions. Sometimes we need to just stop and listen. And that's, I think, one of the biggest lessons in this fight against the absolute destruction of the most defenseless, is that there are times when it's okay to be quiet. I don't mean inactive. I don't mean passive, but I mean willing to listen to someone, because then you hear, because there are different circumstances, obviously, that lead people to the horrific decision of abortion. That doesn't lessen the evil of abortion. I'm not trying to justify it, but I'm saying that sometimes you then take a different approach. It doesn't mean that you compromise on your ideals. It doesn't mean you compromise on a biblical worldview, but sometimes you just slow down and realize, wait a minute, let me try to speak to this specific situation. And as someone who crafts messaging all the time, as a designer, thank heaven for the years and years I've been able to spend developing things, whether they are visual or sonic. I love creating stuff. And part of figuring out, okay, what connects with people it's a trial and error sort of thing. But that really starts with listening. It really starts with trying to understand, okay, what are the circumstances? Because for me, context always brings clarity. Actually, for all of us, context brings clarity. And when you have clarity, I think you can act even more compassionately and more correctly, because you're understanding the situation a little better. And so I would say that's probably one of the biggest things that I learned. People want to fight. And that's what a lot of debating is. I've been in formal debates and I've been in informal debates on college campuses. I'm not really talking about that, but I'm talking about people just want to argue and argue and argue, and they oftentimes miss the essence of something. Sometimes just stop and listen. Or in the case where you're always the one who's silent and yet you have that little bit of truth that would actually revolutionize somebody's life, speak that truth.
Kind of going off of that, how can you tell when someone is genuinely searching for truth versus just trying to win an argument?
As someone who is a creative, who loves numbers, I love that fusion of the emotional and the evidential. I think you can kind of just tell. You can tell sometimes in the way that someone carries on a conversation, like you're just trying to be combative. You didn't even hear some of what that person just said. And if you did, you kind of redirect it. And that's something that I know we're all flawed human beings, but you can kind of tell when someone's just trying to win a debate instead of allowing God to speak through them to win a soul. And that takes diligence. That takes humility too. And I'm not saying that I've always been on the winning side of that. I would like to think that over the years I have tried to adjust, but being willing to think, okay, maybe this is not the approach I should take. Let me try this. But you hear it. You hear it sometimes in the language used. You hear it sometimes in the tone of voice used. You hear it sometimes when you hear or see some of these clips online where people are outside of abortion clinics and calling people murderers. I'm like, that's probably not the best approach. That's not the shortest route to winning somebody's heart. You can still be uncompromising in your biblical worldview and still show love. And I think some people take the shortcut instead. And by doing that, they short circuit the possibility of being able to say something that resonates with someone's heart. And I know it's a delicate balance. Communication is always a delicate balance. Sometimes you intended this and like, wait, that's not at all what I meant to say. But if we just, as Christians, if we just took a little more time to know, okay, how does the word speak to this specifically? And then how can I speak to this, understanding maybe a little better who this person is, who this woman is, who this guy is? We just have to do the work. And I think too often we just want to run our mouths without actually doing the diligent stuff beforehand, before expressing our opinion or sharing the truth. Truth takes not only diligence, it takes resilience. That's why I do thousands of hours of research, because I actually want to know the context. So then the next time, this is kind of where scripture says, being ready with an answer. I think that it's not just for the eternal. Of course, that's the most important, but sometimes we need to be ready with an answer in the temporal. And if we're not willing to actually be proactive and intentional about understanding things better, then we're not going to communicate better.
Is there a specific debate or even just conversation around abortion that sticks out in your mind when you think through all the different ones that you've had over the years that you're like, wow, that was a life-changing one?
And my own situation is one of the cases where a lot of people struggle, even those who consider themselves pro-life, being conceived and raped. And that's why you have these things called the exceptions cases. I think some of those are the most profound, because even with my own story, I've met people who, for instance, women who were raped. And can we punish the rapist? Can we start there? Can we talk about that? But to have met women who conceived in rape, and I think her name is Nancy Kelly. I remember standing on the Montgomery, Alabama, the capital of Alabama, the Capitol steps there. And I spoke and I shared about my birth mom. And in fact, one of the legislators there had said that people like me were the residue of the rapist. And I said, I'm not the residue of the rapist. I'm the resilience of my birth mom. And didn't know that I was going to hear a birth mom just moments later who shared how her twins, who were conceived in rape, saved her life. And it just reminded me, even though I've shared my story so many times, it reminded me, here is a woman who experienced the horrific assault of rape and yet talked about how the lives created from that saved her life. That to me was one of the most profound moments. And it reminded me why the word of our testimony is so important, because people want to silence you when you have the truth, no matter what the issue is. They want to silence you. And the devil knows this. That's why he tries to discourage you. But yet, I'll never forget hearing those words from someone where the world says, no, 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 no. The best answer for you, of course, is abortion. That's of course the natural follow-up to something so horrific. And yet she said her twins saved her life. And man, that stuck with me for many years. And I meet a lot of the people who are in those exceptions cases, and you hear about their faith, you hear about their resilience. And it's just, for me, it's a strong reminder of how we can't write off any human life. And as Christians, we should understand Psalm 139, we're fearfully and wonderfully made. It doesn't mean that we were humanly planned. Even in those horrific circumstances, God enables triumph to rise from tragedy all the time.
Have you ever been able to track down what happened to your birth mom?
In fact, in my book, I just released my new book called Should Have Been Aborted, and the documentary. And in fact, both of them were kind of spurred on. I mean, I actually started the book back in 2009 and kind of got it shelved because the work we do through the Radiance Foundation, we were just going nonstop, plus having children and adoptions, and our lives got so busy, I couldn't even spend any time with this. But it was last fall that my entire life, I'd never had any connection with any birth family at all, and had found the last surviving sister of my birth mom, found contact information. And from there, it was honestly God orchestrated moment after moment after moment, my whole life never knowing biological family. And all of a sudden, one weekend, 3 days in a row, met my biological aunt, biological first cousins, and then also found out that I went to school my whole middle and high school life with 2 first cousins. In fact, played football with one of them. His name is Willie. But yeah, I never did connect though with my birth mom. I found out in 2023 when I got my original birth certificate. I found out her name, saw her name for the first time. Her name is Sharon. And my wife found out immediately online that she had passed away. And man, that was really difficult because my whole adult life, my older teen years and into my 20s, I wanted to, and when I got my master's degree, my goal was to meet her and just tell her, face to face, here are some of the things I've been able to become in my life because of your single decision, because of your courage.
Right.
And to have that just kind of ripped away in a moment. But meeting biological family, got to check out the documentary, which is going to be on Angel Studios, on Angel, by the way. Um, it is unbelievable how God can take something so horrific and bring glory and honor to his name. And to be able to connect with my birth family, and then also connect my birth family with my family, the family I grew up with. It's so hard to express. It was just some unbelievable events that transpired. But yeah, I did not meet my birth mom, but I learned a whole lot about her, and I got all kinds of pictures my whole life, never having one single image, not one image of her. And all of a sudden I have this whole collection of images and all these stories. And now I understand why I am the way I am. Apparently I was a lot like my birth mom in personality. Stubborn, strong-willed. Yeah. That explains to my parents all these years later that it wasn't their failure. It was in my DNA.
It's who you are. Yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about marriage, actually. How has your relationship with your wife changed you as a man?
She puts up with me. She loves me like crazy, but she puts up with me and still loves me. That blows my mind. I mean, first of all, I love being married. My wife, Bethany, is amazing. We fell in love at first sight when we met at Regent. Actually, it was at a planning meeting for a pregnancy center benefit concert. I was in a band at the time, the lead singer, and that's how we met. But she definitely, I know I hear the phrase, it sounds cliche to people, but she makes me better. She does. I remember one of the first nights after being married, we were having an argument on the way down to our new home. We just gotten back from our honeymoon and we were arguing. And that night she's like, I don't go to sleep with things unresolved. And I'm like, well, we'll have to talk about it in the mornings. She literally would not let me sleep. And I don't like, guys tend to try to withhold so they can just kind of process things and get back to it later. But she did not want to go to sleep. And I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be an interesting marriage here. Cause she kept poking at me. She would literally not let me sleep. I was so mad. But honestly, it was one of the best things for me because it forced me to want resolve. And sometimes I know you can't resolve something in just a moment's time, but it was that sort of thing within her that she just didn't want to go to sleep angry. She didn't want the sun to set on her anger. And that helped me be a better person. That among a number of other things, but I love being married to someone who's not only my best friend, but someone who loves the Lord. And so when you have that combination, you have a marriage that's really rooted in the right things, that that you're trying to point each other in the right direction. Do we fail? Yeah. We fail all the time. Probably me more than her. But I'm so grateful for a wife who loves the Lord and who loves me and who sees all my stinking flaws and loves me through them. That's really an awesome thing. It's a reflection of the Lord. Now, my wife's not perfect. God is, but he still sees all of our deficiencies. And yet it's like, you're my son, you're my daughter. I love you. Yeah. Bethany makes me a better person, makes me want to love the Lord more because of who I see in her, the God I see in her. And I hope the same way, because I'm, as a spiritual head of the house, I would hope that I'm also imparting that to my wife, to my kiddos. But yeah, wives make you better.
How do you guys prioritize your marriage? Obviously, you're running an organization. You guys both have a lot of stuff going on. You have a house full of kids. because I think that's an important thing for us to model for our kids, is that we're prioritizing our marriage. One of the things that drives my kids crazy is that I always tell them that their mom's the most important person in the house to me. And I find that super offensive. And I'm like, one
I
day
know.
with you. So how do you guys do it? How do you prioritize your marriage?
They don't like that remark.
They don't.
They're like, wait, I'm not the most important. Hey, guess what? You're not the most important person in the universe. It's just, it's hard for kids to kind of understand that. And I would admit that as a kid, I would not have fully understood that, but I saw it practiced by my dad and my mom, that my dad did prioritize my mom and vice versa. And you have to do that. And there are little ways that we do that. I mean, and we struggle with that too, because of running our own nonprofit. There are a lot of things you have to do. Sometimes there are boundaries that we fail to keep up between work and home, but we have to prioritize each other. Date nights are huge. I mean, just taking the time, I don't care how busy you are. I mean, it's just like when you start your day, people typically jump right into work. And I find that compulsion too. And I have to constantly fight it, because the beginning of the day belongs to the Lord. Let's start thanking the Lord. Let's do our devotions. Well, in the same way, taking that time out with your wife, with your spouse, to just be like, you are the most important thing. Let's get away from all the clutter and all the noise and just spend time together. And being intentional about that means the world. And so you set a night, or if you have that much free time, maybe you set 2 or 3 nights. I don't know. But just to go out on a date your wife. This is important. She needs to know that she's important. And I know with all the busyness of school schedules and stuff, sometimes you just allow yourself to get bogged down. And don't let yourself be discouraged. Like, oh, well, it's been months and we've failed. So what? Start over again. It's okay. Bethany and I have done that over and over and over again. Just keep going, because your wife has to be, I mean, Jesus first, of course, your wife, your kids, and then all the other things that follow that. And you keep those things in the right priority. You keep things in the right order. It changes everything in your home.
What's something that being a dad has taught you about the heart of the Father?
Man, I love being a dad. I love being a dad. And I really attribute a lot of that to my dad, who he was the most amazing man I've ever known. But being a dad, I remember once I was holding my daughter, Aaliyah, and she had RSV, like this respiratory thing. And so it was late at night. I'm sitting there on the couch and I'm just holding her. And I felt like for the first time I had this revelation of how much God loves us. I'm holding my baby girl who depended entirely on her daddy in that moment, and on her parents, in general. And it just reminded me how dependent we are on God, and how needy we are. We have needs, and yet he's a father, the other father, who wants to fulfill those needs. He wants to love us. He wants us to feel fulfilled. Of course, these are things that according to his will, but I just remember sitting on that couch, holding my door girl, and just feeling like, oh my gosh, this is how God feels. Like he feels about us. I mean, he literally will move mountains for us. He'll part seas for us. I would do anything for my kiddos. And that for me was one of the first times that I had the heart of the Father revelations just in my life, um, as vivid and as strong as I did in that moment. And, having 4 kids and seeing them through all of their different years, the years of complete dependency, and now the years of teenage years where they're still dependent in a different way, sometimes too much. But I'm blown away by how having the heart of the Father helps you react differently to situations, because it's that love you have so much for your child that it's unconditional. Now we're humans and we fail in that unconditional part, but it's an amazing thing to have that desire to want, like, no matter what you do, I'm going to love you. I'm going to hate that you're doing this thing wrong, perhaps, but I'm going to love you through this no matter what. I always want to have the heart of the Father. And I thank God that I had a dad who showed that to us, who I mean, he gave his all. I mean, his all. He had 13 kids. I mean, 13 kids, and he never stopped giving his all. So I have 4 kids. I'm never going to stop giving my all.
So this next question is something that I ask to everyone just because it's one of my favorite questions to ask. When you are at the end of your life, or maybe even after you've passed on, what's the one thing that you hope comes to your kids' mind first when they think about dad?
Definitely want them to know that they were loved. They had a dad who loved the Lord. That's it. I want them to know that I love Jesus and I love them. If that's the thing that they remember, then I've succeeded.
All right. So this is my last question for you. For the guys who've listened to this and they want to connect with you outside of this space, maybe to get your book or to watch the documentary or any of the other stuff that you have going on, how can they do that?
Well, you can get in touch with us at the Radiance Foundation, social media while we're still on there, and our main website, which is Radiance, RADIANCE.life, to get a copy of my book, Should Have Been Aborted, or to watch the documentary, Should Have Been Aborted.
All right, Ryan, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I really appreciate it. Thanks for listening to this episode. You can find out more about us by going to our website, noblepursuit.org, or by following us on Instagram at noblepursuitmen. You can find out more information about today's guest by looking in the description below.